Alright, so today's movie review is on the film The Golem from 1920, and this is a movie that's the third film in the Golem series, and is the only existing one of the three. There was a film in 1915 and 1917, excuse me, and this is the only one that still exists in its entirety. I believe you could see clips of the other ones, but all of them are directed and star Paul Wegener, who we see here in the Golem costume, the clay-looking guy. And this is considered the best of the series. Again, the other two don't exist, but when you look at reviews, this is considered the best of them. And another cool fact about the Golem is this is considered one of, if not the earliest horror film series. I believe there were two more after this, I want to say. But I think that's really cool that I don't know, just we're really cool that we even have this film, from 1920. That's only 104 years ago, and I'll get a little bit more into my thoughts on it as we go along. And some more behind the scenes details about the Golem from 1920. So Paul Wegener had the idea of making the film about the Golem after hearing the original legend told in Prague. So this is a story that's very famous Jewish, I don't know what you'd call folklore type of story. He's kind of like the boogeyman, or kind of like, like a monster in that way. So I think that's pretty interesting that's the case. And Paul Wegener was Wegener, these German names. He was unhappy with the 1915 film he did, and so he decided to make another one, which is the 1917, and then this one. This one kind of acts as a prequel to the other films. So this might even be one of the earliest prequels as well. So I think those are all some pretty interesting behind-the-scenes details about the film. Now let me get into my thoughts on the plot. So the plot, I gave it a 3.5 out of 5. I thought it was good. I love the idea of it, especially how it's a legend. It's a real legend that people told all the time. And it's definitely a huge inspiration for Frankenstein. You could definitely tell here. I mean, he's like a big monster, comes to life, whatnot, kind of wreaks havoc. And just other monster movies in general. This is probably one of the earliest. I just don't think the execution was great. That's why I gave it a 3.5. We don't really get the Golem until pretty much halfway through the film. The film's only hour 20, hour 10 minutes. There's a restored version that's longer, but that one I haven't seen. This is the one I watched, which was on YouTube. But we don't, even when he's there, what's he doing? He's going around getting groceries. He's just kind of nothing. He's just walking around, right? So it's a bit underwhelming, especially compared to The Phantom of the Opera in 1925, which was another silent film. That came out just 5 years after this movie. And to me, that one is a much more compelling, much more scary story. This one, it was cool seeing the Golem and all of that, but really, what does he do? He throws a guy off a cliff and he dies. Or not a cliff, but off the top of a tower, and the guy dies. That's it, Like, there's not a whole lot there with the story, and I wish there was better execution with it. So that's why I gave it a 3.5. So let's move on to acting. So the acting, I gave it a 3.5, or no, I gave it a 3 out of 5, excuse me. So I thought Paul Wegener, pictured here, I think he's the best part of the film in my opinion. I love his costume. I love just how menacing the Golem is. I just wish he was doing more things. I wanted him to be, causing havoc and going crazy, or like Frankenstein's monster, where at first he doesn't know how to control himself, and then eventually he just gets mad and he's just done with everything, right? I wish we saw more something like that. I thought that would have been really cool, but we don't get that. And then also in regards to acting, I thought the other actors, there's these main guys, there's an old rabbi, he was a bit too hammy for me. There's a weird romance going on, like a love triangle going on. I didn't like any of those actors either. I really think Paul Wegener was the best one, and he's the only one that I wanted to see more of, and we don't get hardly any of him. He's barely in the movie, and just that alone, I gave it a 3 out of 5. All right, next is directing, so kind of talking about Paul. I also gave that a 3 out of 5. You know, I actually prefer his acting over the directing. I don't like the plot choices he made, especially not having the Golem doing a lot of stuff. I mean, really, if you think about it, he just kind of picks up people, throws them around, but that's it, you know? It really doesn't get crazy till the end, and even that is like 2 minutes, if that. Very underwhelming. I also don't like the abrupt ending or how easy it's resolved. You know, the way he comes to life, there's a star in his chest you could kind of see there. And when that's plugged into him, that brings him to life and whatnot. But if you take that out, he falls over asleep, right? So a little kid figures that out and pulls it off. I was like, come on. I don't know. I wasn't a huge fan of that. Again, I wanted to see more terror and horror. And, you know, I'm upset. I'm upset we didn't get more of the Golem, and I kind of blame Paul Wegener here because he made all the choices. It wasn't like the studio was completely taking over everything, right? You know, he decided, no, we're going to show more of the other characters around him. And it's kind of a familiar trope we see nowadays where people would rather show, like in the modern Godzilla movies. We don't see Godzilla as much. We see all the people's interactions more. Now, a good example, though, is Godzilla -1, where the character story is actually really compelling and really good, and then it's elevated by the monster, too. And it elevates, they work in tandem with each other. This, kind of like other modern monster movies, I feel like they don't interact, don't mesh at all. They kind of feel out of place. And so I wasn't a huge fan of that. And I blame Paul Wegener. So, and so that's why I gave it 3 out of 5. All right, next is cinematography and special effects. So I gave that a 4 out of 5. I actually really liked it. I thought it was excellent. I love the building and the fire scene that we see here. I love the effects when the golem is created. It was really cool. Example of early visual effects, like we have some rotoscoping and really cool camera effects that were really cool. I was very impressed with that. I thought the costume of the golem was really cool, and the fake clay. They had these statue ones that you could kind of tell were fake, but they still looked a lot like him. I really liked them. But again, I wish we had more of the golem. That's why I give it a 4 and not a 5, because he's barely in it. But in the scenes he's in, he's fantastic and really brings it up a notch. All right. So then next is the music. Music, I gave it a 3.5 out of 5. So when I review silent films, it's hard, giving a high score to the music because sometimes it's not the original score. And the one I saw on YouTube, I don't think was the restored version or the music that is in the actual Kino Lorber release, because that just came out, I think, earlier this year, maybe later last year. And they restored the score to it. They tried to make it as much as like the original as possible. So the version I saw, I don't know if that was, I don't think it's that version, because I didn't see Kino Lorber or any of those things at the beginning of it. So that's why I gave it a 3.5, because it's not the original score. It's in the public domain, so people can mix it however they want. It may not even be the full film, honestly. I was going to watch it on Canopy, but it's not on Canopy anymore. It's a mess. So I saw it on YouTube. I would like to give it another chance, maybe in a couple of years, just the movie in general, just to see the difference between the extended and then this version of the film. But in the meantime, for now, I'm giving it a 3.5. But like I said, I don't know if it's the original score or not, so I can't give it a 4. Because if it's good, well, it's not the original intention, right? So that's why I gave it a 3.5. All right. So tallying that all up, that brings my Letterboxd score to a 3.4 out of 5, which I'm rounding to a 3 out of 5. And that's a that's a critic list score of 68%. So would I recommend this movie? I think only for horror film fans and just fans of German Expressionism in general. But I don't know. I want to try again in a couple years and maybe with the correct Kino Lorber version. But I definitely won't be picking it up. I want to try again before I decide to do that. It's because they're expensive, But I wasn't the biggest fan. I personally like Phantom of the Opera 1925. That's an American film, Universal, but I liked that for German Expressionism. I liked Metropolis 1927. I thought that was a better version of this. Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, that's also a great version of German Expressionism and horror. I think those are better examples. And so with that, those are my thoughts on the Golem from 1920. And like I said, I think check out those other films I mentioned. Those would be much better examples of German Expressionism. And so with that, that's the film review for today.